Peace and blessings, family. This is your brother, asarimhotep with the Martin Delaney Center for Egyptology. And today we have an excellent lecture for you. Um, we're going to be dealing with and continuing our conversation on Kimoyo and hip hop as a Kimoyo tradition, but we are going to focus on the DJing aspect of the Kimoyo tradition. So, all that and more when we return in just a moment. And we are back. And as stated before, the focus of our discussion today is hip hop as a Kimoyo tradition. But I want to alter the conversation a little bit and expand our conceptualization of the DJ as, being one of the five major elements of hip hop culture, and to identify the DJ as a pharmacist. And uh, hopefully by the end of this discussion, these ideas regarding the relationship between a DJ and a pharmacist will become much clearer. So, as stated previously, this is a continuation of our first discussion of hip hop as a Kimoyo tradition, an introduction to Jashe, where we focused on the dance or the b-boying and dance aspect of the Jashe or hip hop tradition. And so, with this conversation, we are going to be focused on the DJ. But before we get into the inner workings of our conversation, it is best to kind of recap for those who are just joining this conversation and don't necessarily know what Kimoyo is. And so Kimoyo is a Kikongo term that has to deal with the art of vitalism and dynamism. And I've done an entire lecture on Kimoyo, so I would encourage everyone to kind of search the YouTube bar for the full Kimoyo discussion. But I have come to kind of add on to the definition. And so we have, as you see over here on the right hand side, the art of adding life to life, or it's the art of vitality and prosperity, of making things to flourish in all areas of life, the healing power of giving, the healing art of open hearted sharing. The more formal definition that I've given Kimoyo is a natural and social vital force exchange system that produces kininga. And kininga is a Kikongo cognate for the word ma'at, that we should be familiar with coming out of ancient Kemet. And so the linguistics, although I would be happy to do that right now, is kind of beyond the scope of our current conversation. So you just have to see that in the other videos that I've done on Ma'at. Right. And so the way that this balance comes about and that Kimoyo comes about comes from three particular activities. And so we harness Moyo, which is spirit or vitality or life, or we can use the Yoruba term Ashe, which we'll use throughout this conversation. And to learn how to harvest it, to utilize it, and then to transmit it. And that's the focus of Kimoyo itself. And so I've come up with these diagrams that help us to kind of visualize these processes within the context of Bantu cosmology, and this cosmology not only being honed in Central Africa, but being carried with us in the diaspora here in the United States, in the Caribbean, especially in Haiti, and in places like Brazil and Colombia and other areas in South America, right? So, but again, that's beyond the scope of our conversation today, but just, to give you some highlights. So I want to put the larger Kimoyo and Jashe conversation within another conversation when it comes to this idea of culture. And so while I won't have time to go in depth into these concepts which you see on your screen, they are worth mentioning at this point in time because it'll kind of give us an understanding of why Jashe, why are we conceptualizing these things in the way that we're doing right now. And so I've come to kind of organize within these three particular concepts when discussing human cultures, right? So, of course, you have a culture, which is a full-blown culture with all of the necessary elements to sustain life and community, right? So these are people who have, kind of been undisturbed, who have created, thoughts, values, and systems to promote life and sustain life and community in an organic way, right? And it is gone through its trials and error period and has stabilized over time. Then you have what we have. We have what we call an unculture. And this is where I argue that African American culture currently is. So you can kind of look at these as kind of states of being for populations. So what I argue is that African Americans have an unculture, and that is that we possess elements of a viable culture. However, it is unorganized to serve the community. We haven't institutionalized those life bits, those life forces and thoughts and value systems, and we're kind of losing it the more and more that we integrate into European societies, values, and cultures, and adopting Arabic or Arab culture or Hebrew culture, and now we have pretendians, people who believe that they were the first here on the continent of North America, and so they have allegedly no connections to African people, and so they want to call themselves Native Americans and Indians, and it's all of these particular types of forces that are pulling away from the heart of who we are, that is hard to organize and develop a culture in the fullest sense of the word. So that's why I say it's an unculture, because it's unorganized. And you have these little bits here and there, and if we organized it, then it would be a powerful. So of course, slavery has brought together many different ethnic groups from the continent of Africa, and we've been forced to kind of blend in with each other. But we were also, spread out, and the United States is a very big place, and this is what has, contributed majorly to why it's hard to organize these bits and cultures that have developed in pockets across the United States, especially in the Southern Belt. So, and then you have what is called an anti-culture. And so I define these as systems of thoughts and behaviors antithetical to the creation and sustaining of culture, life, and community. And this is what has developed here in the United States. And so what we have is African people that were forced here and forced to develop strategies for survival here and expression, who instead of, and there's internal and external forces that have not allowed for the organizing of those fragments of African and African American culture to be a full blown culture in my eyes. And because we are moving further and further away from that center, we are adopting more and more of European values, thoughts, expressions, and the like. And with that, anti-African, therefore anti-culture expressions, values, and thoughts, and the like. Thus, the pretendians and everybody want to be Moors and Hebrew Israelites and the like. Right. So that's another conversation for another day. But I want to put this into the conversation so that people can understand why we are organizing and institutionalizing hip hop, quote unquote, culture. Hip hop is not a culture in the strictest sense until we institutionalize it and properly label things. And so we have now people trying to hijack the origins and the creation of hip hop culture or hip hop unculture, and it is causing all kinds of problems. So this is one of the reasons why, we are formalizing it within the banner of Jashe. And so hopefully, things will make more sense as we go further into this conversation. And so, as I stated in a previous conversation, therefore, I have taken it upon myself to dig deep into my ancestral bag of wisdom in order to reconceptualize and reorganize hip hop culture with plans to institutionalize it so that it can better serve the interest of African people. Right. And so, as I stated earlier, what we're calling hip hop is Jashe. And Jashe is the Ashe of jazz. And Ashe is a Yoruba word that means many things, but fundamentally it means power, spirit, the ability to do. It is a force of nature, and it can be instruction, document. It can mean a host of things, right? But it is to make it simple, it can also simply be defined as vital force. So it's the vital force, the spirit of jazz, Jashe. And jazz is an African word you can find all over in various forms across Africa. But the form that came here in the United States is more of the West African form, coming from like the Sierra, Fulani, Wolof, etc. And so we're synthesizing these concepts like with Jasi, which in the Yoruba language means worth or value. And we'll have another discussion separate from this one where we talk about how Jashe ultimately is a system of strategies for inventing yourself and making yourself valuable in various contexts and ways. And the ultimate objective of Jashe as a tradition is to achieve a Jashe, which is victory after much difficulty. So I've gone in the process of formally kind of defining some things in terms of this Afro-American healing arts tradition, Jashe. And so we say that Jashe is a collection of life strategies that helps an individual to learn how to shegun. That means to win, overcome, to tower in the Yoruba language, over life's 1001 challenges to become the Ashegun, conqueror, vanquisher, victor of life. The goal of Jashe is to achieve a Jashe, victory after much difficulty. with the secondary objective to obtain a victorious consciousness through the mastery of 5 elements or healing arts. So this Jashe is a healing arts tradition started by African Americans here in the United States. And so the 5 elements of Jashe are Ashejo, which is the expression of Ashe through dance, formerly known as b-boying, right? But it encompasses so much more than simply b-boying and breakdancing. So it's dance in general. So that's what the word Jo means in the Yoruba language. So it's the Ashe Jo, the expression of Ashe through dance. And then we have Iyashe, the expression of Ashe through the visual arts. So we're not limiting ourselves to graffiti on walls. There's so many different visual arts that have come out of the hip hop tradition, so that you just have to kind of label it as arts itself, right? And Ya meaning to draw, to paint in the Yoruba language, and Iya would be, drawings, paint, or art, right? And then we have Afalshe, the power of making events to happen through authoritative utterance. And so this would be equivalent to the emceeing aspect of hip hop unculture, right? And then we have Eshegun, the expression of Ashe through the combat arts. And so many people may not realize how integral martial arts is to the development and sustaining of hip hop. And so for us, the 4 martial arts, primary arts, are 52 blocks, jiu-jitsu, capoeira, and the game of chess. So we're defining chess as a martial art, right? And then lastly, we have Orin Ashe. Orin is a Yoruba word for music and song. And so this would include the DJ. And so we can't just leave it at the DJ, because the DJ is just one aspect of it. Because now you have the producers and the musicians, and we have hip hop bands. And so it's just the music in general. So the expression of Ashe through music, right? So we're going to go into a second aspect of this introduction so we can get some context on the genealogy and the lineage and the focus and purpose of hip hop. And so we're going to take the first signs coming out of Africanisms in American Culture, edited by Joseph E. Holloway. I believe this was published in 2005, this version here. And there's a chapter in there called Africanisms in African American Music by Portia K. Maltsby. And in this particular paragraph that I'm citing here, there's a lot to unpack, so we'll just go through it. She states, the song lyrics and music styles of funk, disco, and rap music epitomize the changing and sometimes conflicting viewpoints about progress. Although many performers continue to express optimism about the future, some introduce lyric themes of frustration, disillusionment, and distress. The soul sound dominated the first half of the 1970s, but by the mid-1970s it had been transformed. Whereas soul carries the trademark of message music. And there's a reason why I have this bolded in purple. That soul is connected to message music, right? So they're saying, whereas soul carries the trademark of message music, funk, disco, and rap music bore the stamp of party music. It injected a new spirit of life into black communities and became a major unifying force for a core of African Americans. This spirit is reflected in the lyric themes: party, have a good time, let yourself go, and dance, dance, dance. These themes suggested that the music had a therapeutic function. This is why when we go back it is the Joshe Afro-American Healing Arts, because the objective was to heal as a result of waging war against an oppressive system, right? Thus why the soul was message music, because we would send messages and encouragement through the music, right? So these themes suggest that the music had a therapeutic function. Rather than communicate political or intellectual messages, it encouraged blacks to release tension by simply being themselves. At the same time, the infectious beat of this music created an atmosphere that allowed for self-expression and unrestricted social interactions. So again, the soul music was considered message music. But then here comes funk, disco, and rap, which was more so party themed. And so when you see what we're calling hip hop developing in the 70s, it was strictly, for the most part, just party music, right? And that's and they were trying to relieve themselves, because as we stated earlier, we were living in oppressive and really oppressive times. And so the civil rights movement is, generally agreed to be between the years of 1954 to 1968. And 68 is very important because this is the year that Pigmeat Markham released his track, Here Comes the Judge. And you hear a lot of folks say this is one of the inspirations for the iteration of hip hop that, came out of the Bronx in the 1970s, right? But it's because the We Shall Overcome, the soul tradition, emerges in this time frame. And so it had more so of a message of overcoming and uplift, right? And then here comes the so-called funk and disco and rap music, which had a central party thing. But black people can't just focus on the party all the time, because as soon as hip hop becomes very popular, remember the first real quote unquote rap records was in 1979. That was the year I was born. But just a few years later, we get this track here. This is Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. And Melly Mel is rapping all throughout this song called The Message. And, we know that Rakim is credited with changing the way that people rap when he came out. And so the way that the modern rapping really kind of begins with Rakim, but I would argue that it really begins with Melly Mel in The Message. Because before then, everything was just really kind of party themes. But when Melly Mel comes out with The Message, then we start talking about serious content and describing what's going on in the community and giving advice on how to overcome these particular challenges. This is all in The Message. And it's ironic that the song is called The Message. So remember what soul music was considered. It was called message music. So we have Melly Mel bringing back the soul in the tradition, right? And then, you'll find that a lot of rap records in these early periods, starting in the 80s, all had the message type of themes. Thus, Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five brought back the soul tradition by bringing back the message in the music. And in the early days of this iteration of hip hop after The Message, more and more songs started coming together or being produced with a positive message and focus in it versus just a strictly party, everybody get up and dance and wave your hands in the air. And so now we're starting to see the complexity and the diversity of hip hop culture emerging and unfolding in different fractions. And so this is important because soul is a type of jazz. And so we're linking this all together. So this is a text, The Meaning of Soul, from Dr. Emily J. Lordy. And, you know, I'm kind of iffy about this text. It's clearly Eurocentric in its orientation, but it does have some jewels in it. So I recommend this text for everyone who is listening. So it's The Meaning of Soul, Black Music and Resilience since the 1960s. And the first chapter starts off like this, and it drops a jewel for us. So it says, before it came to denote, talking about soul music, before it came to denote a musical genre or to encompass a cultural logic, soul was mostly or most often used to describe a quality of jazz performance. In a pioneering 1961 article about the subgenre of soul jazz, Ebony, the magazine writer and editor, Laureen Bennett, explained, quote, soul, to be sure, is not even a music. It is the feeling with which an artist invests his creation. And I have these two things highlighted for a reason. The techniques for expressing that feeling were honed in the Black Baptist Church, which Baraka described, that's Amiri Baraka, as the wellspring of Black music. Here was the fount to which soul jazz artists like Horace Silver and Max Roach returned, in part to distinguish themselves from white cool jazz, in quote, musicians. By rooting the soul jazz sensibility in the Black church, which Bennett Cowley describes as a never never land from which white musicians are barred, Bennett and others frame soul as a technical and spiritual quality that white artists could not learn or appreciate. So the latter part of this is a different discussion in general, but I want to focus on, you know, or just remind the reader first that soul is a type of jazz, right? And it is described not necessarily as a genre of music, but as a feeling. And it is that same feeling and that same connection to jazz that we see later on in the development of hip hop. And to the point that even Eric B. and Rakim, when they first came out, have a song, You Know I Got Soul, or You Know It Got Soul, right? And of course, that is a play on James Brown, who we see here on the right, who they sampled first and foremost, and who has that song, you know, You Got Soul, right? And so everything is going to come full circle here because James Brown is important to the development of hip hop as we understand it, because they're trying to imitate James Brown and the soul and funk that he produced. But what I'm here to say is that all of this is jazz, right? So we just heard, or we just read, that soul is jazz performance, right? And so, and that it is a feeling, and this feeling is also a part of hip hop, right? And so this is why the title of these, besides the Kimoyo part, is Jashe, the Ashe of jazz. The soul hip hop is a real hip hop is part of the soul jazz tradition, right? And in more ways than one. So this is in essence supported by Karis One. This is a lecture that he did in 2005, I believe, at Temple University here in Philadelphia.
Here I am. Hip hop cannot be taught by words. It's the feeling we get when you hear that a conversation like this is going down. The feeling you get, y'all got to be there. It's that feeling you get, that's hip hop. That feeling, other people hear beat go by the call, boom, boom, bap. Other people like, oh man, you're like, what, who is that? This is the feeling you get. Unknown.
So you see from KRS-One's the snippet from that larger lecture that hip hop is a feeling, just like jazz is a feeling. This is what we mean by soul. Is it comes from the depths of the inside. It comes from spirit. And it's from that spirit that the various expressions emerge. And we're going to hear KRS-One say that. But it's the spirit, but it's also an attitude, right? And so we're going to see these parallels here. So the soul text, the meaning of soul text continues on page 26. Shaped as it was by claims to know it when you see it, speaking of soul discourse also emphasized Black people's capacity to not only create, but also apprehend. That means to understand soulful expression. Even those who struggled or refused to define soul often claimed, as Tanisha Ford writes, to be able to identify soul when they saw, tasted, and heard it. And it's the same thing when it comes to hip hop. You know, real hip hop, just you can't. Most people can't describe it, but they know it when they see it, right? They know when something's not of the hip hop tradition versus something that is real, true hip hop. When in the 1968 Esquire feature on soul, Claude Brown defined the concept as walking down the street in ways that says, "This is me, curse word, mother, It's exhibitionism and it's effortless." And this is highlighted because what you see here, remember, this is in 1968, that it is an attitude, the way that you walk down to have soul, and soul is part of the jazz tradition. It's that jazz coolness. This is me. This is an attitude like I am the ish. An exhibitionism, right? Brown implied that the strutter's soulful style would be recognized and applauded as such by other members of her community. When in another part of the same issue, Brown celebrated the language of soul, or soul talk. He explained that although spoken soul might sound like improper English to outsiders, those in the know would understand my instead of my and yo instead of your to be the most communicative and meaningful sounds ever to fall upon human ears. So they're just talking about African American speech, so-called ebony phonics. African American vernacular English. The way that we speak is the soul tradition. So this attitude is just the general culture of Black African American folks, right? And so this is why we highlight this section here. This is me, Mom, because it's the attitude. This attitude of audacity, of boldness, of courageousness, of defining myself and letting the world know who I am instead of you telling me who you think I am, right? And this is the quintessential character of hip hop, and it should be, because it's part of the jazz soul tradition, right? So we have these testimonies from people in the Bronx, for example.
Hip hop come from my attitude. It never changed. It goes from my attitude. Hip hop was a negative attitude from the street.
Hip hop. What is hip hop? Hip hop is the behavior, the attitude, the character that creates rap. creates DJ, creates graffiti writing. Yeah, I don't see it. Okay, right. Just gaze over here. You will see graffiti writing, and I'll tell you why these are out here as well. But this is what hip hop is. It is not graffiti writing. It is not rap. It is not DJ. It is not beatboxing. It is the attitude that produces these events, these performances. So understand this first. Hip hop is a consciousness. Hip hop is a way to be. And from that way to be, we get rap, DJ, graffiti writing, breaking, beatboxing, etc.
Right. So I hope this is made clear that, these expressions of DJing, b-boying, MCing, graffiti writing, et cetera, are not independent hip hop. It's the attitude, the character. It's just African American audacity and boldness. And this boldness was amplified during the civil rights movement when the younger folks was starting. This is the protest movement. There's like, we're not taking this standing down or sitting down anymore. We're going to force change of our condition. And so this attitude that emerges during the civil rights movement extends to the children of the civil rights movement who were growing up in the late 60s and early 70s, these young kids and teenagers. And it's from that youth movement that this iteration of the expressiveness that we call hip hop emerges. Right?
Hip hop comes from my attitude.
And that attitude and swagger, again, is the young folks trying to imitate those cool elders, right? In the Black Panther Party and the Muhammad Ali's, etc. Gangsters and pimps, on the street corners and the like, a whole sway of things, but nothing had more influence on the development of hip hop than James Brown. And we have here the God MC Rakim, who was going to articulate this very eloquently.
What did James Brown mean to you, and what do you think James Brown means to hip hop?
I used to sit down and listen to his records like, what was this dude doing back then, man? What was he on? He was on a whole new planet, man. And to take what he did then, that was like the beginning of hip hop, man. The vibe that he came on, the beats, the horns loud, the dancing, the screaming, you know what I mean? It became swagger, you know what I mean? We took what he was doing and it became swagger to the point where somebody could take that and use it somewhere else. You know what I mean? As far as what James Brown brought to the game. If he was a basketball player, or you know what I mean, we took it and brought it in the rap. You know what I mean? James finished doing, we gonna get his man come out, throw the cape over on top of him. That was gangster right there, man. You know what I mean? So, he meant so much, man. We didn't really understand until he was gone. When we sat there, stared at his picture with, like, wow, he gone now. Then it really dawns on you what he did, man. You know what I mean? So, love forever, man, James Brown, man. And hopefully, the world will born a few more of those, man.
And so James Brown and that funk sound, that soul sound that he brought is instrumental. And there are a few others, but they're still within the same tradition, like Pigmeat Markham, for example, another individual who came out in 1960. Well, his famous Here Comes the Judge comes out in 1968. And you'll hear some testimony of people trying to imitate him, and so the young folks in New York are taking the Southern soul jazz character in music and shaping it and using it to help shape a movement in New York, right? And so we have to understand the role of New Orleans and how jazz and funk is just jazz. It's just another word for jazz, right? And so uh, there's an article um, on the Ethnomusicology Review website, volume 18, that was published in 2013 that puts this all into perspective. So it's called Strictly Second Line, Funk, Jazz, and a New Orleans Beat, right? And so it's by Benjamin Doliak, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. So it states in the article, in 1976, filmmaker Maurice Martinez asked Mardi Gras Indian chief Jake Milone to describe the characteristic rhythm that underlies the music of Black New Orleans. Some people call it funk. Malone replied, but to us, it's strictly second line. And so second line music is the street jazz music that follows funerals. It's a unique New Orleans funeral tradition. And so when they're doing the funeral parade, the first part of the parade is they're following the casket and they're playing sad music. But then the second part of the parade, they're sending off the now deceased ancestor, into the spirit realm, with a happy and joyous celebration type music, which is jazz music. And so we call that in New Orleans second line. And so some people call it funk, but to us it's strictly second line. So other people started calling it funk, but it's just jazz music. So this is part of the problem that I mentioned earlier in our conversation, that a lot of our music is just one music, but people keep labeling it something else in different spaces, so it makes it seem like these are different genres, including hip hop. And so this is why I keep linking hip hop to soul jazz tradition, because that's what it is, right? And it continues. Funk, in quotes, has several different meanings in American popular discourse, but since the 1970s, it has largely connoted a heavily syncopated, groove-centered style of African American music. Second line, on the other hand, refers to the rhythms of a Black parading tradition originating in 19th century New Orleans. Since the 1960s, when James Brown essentially invented funk music by building on rhythms introduced to him by two New Orleans schooled drummers. The relationship between second line and funk rhythms has been increasingly symbiotic. They're one and the same. So, these two drummers, one of them, the great Stubblefield, um, who did the funky drummer beat, right? Which is probably the most heavily sampled of all of James Brown's music, is just second line music. It's just jazz music. So whether you call it jazz, whether you call it soul, whether you call it funk, it is all the same thing. So this is why I went through this, because we have to understand what is going on here. So the genealogy and continuity of it all is jazz second line. Some people call it soul, some people call it funk. It's all the same thing. And from this expression, from the Southern band, marching band, jazz tradition, emerges hip hop, right? And later on, they added the rap component to the soul jazz component, right? Which they mislabeled disco at one point and all other kinds of stuff, right? And so, you have people who were there to tell you it was like hip hop in the beginning had nothing to do with rap. It was the DJs playing the music, and the music they were playing was what we call soul, jazz, funk, right?
Everybody came to see the people break. That was hip hop in the very beginning. It was no rapping. Hip hop now is associated with rap. It was no rapping back then when it first started. There was no rap. It was just people dancing. It was.
Would you say burning is a part of hip hop?
Of course it is.
It is.
That's just something.
Burning.
And that hip hop wasn't even thought about.
Right.
We're just playing music, having fun.
Right.
That's what it was. The community. And when they hear the disco king playing music, people from everywhere.
Right.
So all that hip hop, it wasn't no hip hop.
Right.
They just playing music, having fun.
But even then, you know, it wasn't like a crime-ridden place, and it was just good, clean fun. We had fun.
Right?
We had fun. Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what it was all about in the beginnings. It was just DJs playing in the park, community coming together, having fun. And as we read earlier from Africanisms in American culture, that the focus in the beginning of this aspect of the movement was therapeutic, because they're trying to relieve the stress of existing in an oppressive land and in poverty and alike. And so we go to these street jams to relieve tension and have fun and just be us. We're creating a safe space so that we can be who we envision ourselves to be. And that's why the style and the clothing becomes important, the language and the slang, the music. Because when you go into other areas of life and work and school, they're trying to conform you to be very Eurocentric. And so in many respects, this could be considered, Afro-American resistance from the cultural standpoint, right? And so this is a photo of a street jam. I don't know what date this is, but you see the stereotypical boom box, but we have the DJ playing. We have DJ Kool Herc over here. So this has to be at least the mid to late 70s, because now you have the MCs, kind of moving to the forefront, right? And, you would see the DJs in the parks, and you see them carrying these big crates of records, and they're just out there having a good time, right? And so some of the pioneering and notable folks, and I'm not going to go through a chronological list of everyone, just highlight a few DJs. And so, what is emerging is the importance, for example, of Disco King Mario in 1970, 1971. He was born in North Carolina, and in Edenton, North Carolina in 1956. His older brother was a DJ in North Carolina. When his older brother and him moved to the Bronx, they brought that tradition that they in North Carolina to the Bronx. And so when you hear a lot of the older people who were around in the Bronx and Bronxdale and Bronx River projects, they all say the same thing. It starts with Disco King Mario. And, we know the mythology of Kool Herc, quote unquote, starting hip hop. You can't start hip hop. And, what they're doing is just this merging or converging of African-American culture into New York, and New York converging and developing this thing called hip hop, right? And, of course, you have Kool Herc, you have Grandmaster Flash over here on the right. We have DJ Premier, who's from Texas, and This is the DJ Kid Capri. And I put them here because this really starts, I ain't gonna say starts, but they are early folks who were DJs and producers, right? Because the earliest DJs before the rapping component became part of it, they're just playing the music. They weren't producing any music. So they're buying records of great jazz bands, funk bands, soul bands, and singers and playing their music. But now, come the 80s, now the people who are DJing are actually producing music as well. So these are just some of the well-known: DJ Premier, Kid Capri. Of course, we have Pete Rock of Pete Rock and CL Smooth. And down south, you have Manny Fresh. And Manny Fresh, producer and DJ, but he's just like his father. His father was a DJ in New Orleans. And we need to talk about him more and his father more in terms of this development and evolution of hip hop, right? And so understanding that the DJ was playing the music, you have to now associate the DJ with curation. He or she is a curator, right? And they're coming together. They're finding these locations, and they are becoming the communicator. Excuse me, the curators for an art exhibition through sound, right? And so you're familiar with the concept of curation from more art museum type stuff. So I don't know who this is in the photo, but this is just here to show you like someone in an art museum. So somebody had to select these art pieces from particular artists and create a theme for the community to come in to experience and enjoy. So the person who does that is the curator. In the context of hip hop, the curator is the DJ, right? And a few well-known Black curators. This is Horace D. Ballard of Harvard University, and Kelly Morgan, and I forgot where she's at, right? They use their art expertise and connection to culture and curate and display, artwork for the public to enjoy and consume and promote, right? And so when we look at the concept of the curator, being a linguist, I'm always curious about what words mean and the evolution of words, right? And so there's a unique reason why this word was chosen in terms of curator. What does that mean? So curate in the noun form means a spiritual guide, ecclesiastic responsible for the spiritual welfare of those in his charge, a parish priest. From medieval Latin, curatus, one responsible for the care of souls. From Latin curatus, past participle of curar or curare, to take care of. See cure, right? Church of England, since a paid deputy priest of a parish. Curation, curing of disease, restoration of health. Hold on. From Old French, curation, treatment of illness. From Latin, curationem, curiatio, curatio, I should say, a taking care, attention management, especially medical attention. Noun of action from past participle stem of curare, meaning to cure, right? From 1769 is management of guardianship. So if we now interchange the DJ with curator, what is we saying here? Just like the curator who is selecting art pieces to stimulate thought and inspiration for the public, the DJ selects music to stimulate the spirit, mind, soul, and body of the public. And this is connected to the word cure, which we'll get into in a moment. But you can see this concept of curation stems from a health perspective, to take care of, right? And so to curate, the verb, to be in charge of selecting and caring for objects to be shown in a museum or to form a part of a collection of art and exhibit, etc. To be in charge of selecting films, performers, events, etc., to be included in a festival. A festival is a party. So you can see how we can use these terms interchangeably. A DJ is a curator because they select performances in terms of the MC, at least in the early days, and the music to play at the festivals, which we call the jams, park jams, right? Continuing to select things such as documents, music, products, or internet content to be included as part of a list or collection or on a website. A DJ is a curator. And so this is just a photo of someone selecting and going through some music to play somewhere in the future, right? And so the curator comes from the verb to cure, which means to health or a sound state. Directly from Latin, take care of, as we saw earlier. Hence, in medical language, treat medically, cure, in reference to fish, pork, etc., prepared for preservation or drying or salted, right? So the objective of the curator, in a strictly linguistic sense, is to cure, to treat medically, to restore the health or restore the body and mind into a sound and stable state. That's why I say that Kimoyo is the social and exchange system that restores kaninga or ma'at, balance, health. All of this comes together. This is well thought out, right? So when we go back to that citation in Africanisms in American culture, we clearly see when it said that, the rap and the hip hop in the early days had a therapeutic function. It was about the restoration of health in our community. And that's why I say that DJs are pharmacists, right? They're curators. They're guardians, one who has the care or superintendence of something. They're priests of a tradition. They take care of us by curating a playlist and experience where I can release myself, release tension, and heal from the pressures of living in modern society. And so I'm hoping I'm laying the foundation so that you can understand the DJ from a Kimoyo perspective. That's why we're reorienting hip hop unculture back to its African context so that it can become a whole culture, and it can be used for what it is intended for, as part of the Jashe jazz tradition, right? And so throughout this Jashe reorientation, we're going to start naming things using African words from living African languages. So I want to, just like how we use Kimoyo, which comes out of Kikongo, we're going to continue that tradition. So it's two primary languages that we use in the Jashe tradition for the labeling of these hip hop phenomena and jazz phenomena. And that is the Yoruba language and the Kikongo Bantu language, right? And so this comes from Dr. Fukiao's Belwa Meso. It's an unpublished text, and it's the opening of the eyes. It's an initiation text, right? And so, so it's part of that, and then it's another one called Nkisi, and we'll get into what Nkisi means in just a moment. So I'm going to introduce these Kikongo concepts, and then we're going to apply them to the Jashe tradition, right? Hip hop. And so kinsa, to take care, cure, treat, and clean, to put in order, to instruct, to cut. Kinsa, right? And so we just saw what curator means. And to cure, it means to take care, to cure, to treat. So we're just substituting the word for cure, curation, curator, etc. with kinsa. And then we have kinsi, caretaker, charge of community wealth, health agent, curator. So it's going to be an inkisi or inkinsi, because there's going to be a quasi homonym that comes up, and these are two separate words. But insi or inkinsi is a caretaker, a charge of community wealth, a health agent, or a curator. We have kinsu, a pot for carrying, a pot of medicine, a pot to make medicine, container to cook and keep food. And I equate this to the MPC or musical instruments, right? Then we have nkinsa, which means a manner or way of carrying, right? And so we have nkinsa, which is, there's a synonym nkinzi, which means a feast, a ceremony, a collective healing, and second funerals. Second funerals is going to become important. And so we call them matanga, where you get the word tango from, because the tango is a dance that you do at a funeral. So just like in New Orleans, how we have a celebration of life, and there's festive music playing in the jazz tradition, in a second line, they do the same thing in Congo. And so the funeral itself is called a matanga. The dance of the funeral is called a tango, or it's become known as tango when it came over here in the Americas, right? Continue. Nkinsi, needs, value, ceremony of collective participation, rituals, variant of Nkinzi. And then we have Nkisi, which is medicine, remedies, cure, teaching, or doctrine, artifact, didactical tool, taboo, bundle, oath, document, instruction. So Nkisi is different from like Nkinsi. So there's an N in front of the S. So Nkinsi is needs, value, ceremony, but Nkisi is medicine, remedies, cures, teachings, or doctrines. So it's not just, so it can be words, teachings, lessons that uplift, that instruct, and that feed your mind and soul, that help you to heal. Artifacts, didactical tools, taboos, bundles, oaths, documents, instructions. All of this is in Kisi. And then you have Kiinsiki, support, the one who support, curator, the order maker, keeper, etc. You can say in Kiinsiki. And so I've applied these to the hip hop. And so when we start to institutionalize this, you'll see these words come up again. And so you have kiinsa, meaning DJing, producing, providing treatment. That's the act of DJing, producing. It's the medium for providing the treatment. An inkinsi is a DJ, a producer, or a curator. Inkisi is the music in the Jashe tradition, soul, house, hip hop, etc. It's medicine. And then we have Inkinsa, the party, the jam, also the second line. Because remember, Inkinsa is the secondary funeral, the matanga. So when we put it within its African context, it can now be used for what it is meant to be used for. Now the possibilities are endless because now it has a focus. Now it has a context, right? And so we're going to deal a little bit more of Inkisi, right? And what an Inkisi is. And so Inkisi or Inkishi, the plural variations, Minikisi, Zinkisi, or Inkisi, are spirits or an object that a spirit inhabits. It is frequently applied to a variety of objects used throughout the Congo Basin in Central Africa, especially in territory. And I have a lecture on YouTube in Kisi as Netcher. The word in Kisi is a variant of what became Netcher in ancient Egypt, right? Let me read this part again. Throughout the Congo Basin in Central Africa, especially in the territory of Cabinda, that are believed to contain spiritual powers or spirits. The term and its concept have passed with the Atlantic slave trade to the Americas, even here in the United States. So from a Jashe perspective, a Kimoyo perspective, Inkisi is, remember, it is the medicine, but it can be a thought, sound, or teaching, a document. So we're saying that it is the music. And remember that an Inkisi can also be an object that a spirit inhabits. So the spirit is the music, and the record itself is also the Inkisi, the CD player, the tape, the 8-track player, right? These are also Inkisi. And so in Simi Isaki talks about Inkisi, and he says, Inkisi is the name of things we use to help a man when he is sick and from which we obtain health. The name refers to leaves and medicines combined together. And Inkisi is also something that hunts down illness and chases it away from the body. Many people therefore compose it in Inkisi. It is a hiding place for people's souls to keep and compose in order to preserve life. So we've already connected the music as medicine, and the music is the spirit, the soul. Remember soul music? It is that feeling, that attitude that expresses itself in the music, in the graffiti art, in the dance. It's all spirituality. And what are many kisi made of? The essential parts of any kisi are matadi, minerals, bienvenini, bienvenina, plants, and bulu, animals, because they surround and form the basis of life for the Congo people. right? And so the Inkisi is the spirit that hunts down disease. So when you're playing a good soul song, it is hunting down that which ails you and uplifts your spirits and restores your sense of stableness, of sound mind and health, right? And so, as a side note, this is an artifact. It's called an Inkisi Nkondi, and it's kind of like a diploma that is given to an Nganga to let the world know that when they come on a scene, that they are qualified to deal with the mambo, as Fukuyao says, the issues at hand. And I think that we should make one for DJs. Like once we institutionalize this and people pass the course to become DJs, the necessary courses to become the DJs within the Kimoyo and Jashe tradition, that we have these that are created and sanctified by the top DJs and passed down. So this is how we create a tradition, so that when you go to a party, you see in Kisi and Kondi for music and for the curation uh, part, you know, that he is in fact an Inkinsi who is a master of dispensing and creating Inkisi medicines, right? And that this person takes an oath to always have the best interest in mind of the audience that they are producing and caring for, so that he gives them nothing but medicine, he or she, that is, right? So maybe we can put, you know, make some wood in the center, it'd be like a turntable or something like that, right? And so now we go to the DJ as pharmacist. So I did this 3D here. So you see the DJ with the pharmaceutical jacket. And so maybe we need to make pharmaceutical jackets for the DJs, you know, that they can wear during the during the winters or whatnot, and probably some collared shirts during the summer months, right? And spring months. And you know, a pharmacist, you know, you go to a doctor and they tell you, you know, you have high blood pressure or something like this, you need to take this medicine, and here is the prescription. And so you go to a pharmacist who puts the prescription together, and y'all exchange funds, and then the pharmacist provides you with the medicines. And hopefully, you know, it works at either reducing your symptoms or helping to eliminate um, your issues altogether. And so this is a very good analogy for what is going on here in the in the DJ realm, you know, in the Ore Nashe element of Jashe, right? So what is a pharmacist? A pharmacist is a healthcare professional who is an expert in medications and their use. What do? They dispense medications. They fill prescriptions and ensure that the correct amount is dispensed. They also check for allergies and other conditions to ensure the medication is safe. So while I'm reading all of this, back of your mind that I'm really speaking about the DJ, the Inkinsi, right? They advise patients, they provide immunizations, they advise other healthcare professionals, provide general health advice, business management, research, and compounding. So pharmacists can create custom medications to meet a patient's specific needs, right? And so I spoke of earlier about DJs also being producers. And so now they're kind of one and the same in many aspects. And the producer DJ, you know, does this technique called sampling. And sampling could be considered pharmaceutical compounding. So pharmaceutical compounding is when they create custom medications to meet a patient's specific needs. They compound different medicines in particular dosages. And so it's that compounding that is equated to sampling here. So we can see the late, great Jay Dilla, in a record shop looking for some records to sample and to create an inkisi, a track, a medicine, a song, right? And so this is the essence of what a DJ is in the Jashay tradition, in the hip hop tradition, and this is what we want to promote moving forward. And so this is, of course, the Jedi light side of the Force, but there's also the dark side of the Force, right? And so there are other people who produce records and distribute sounds and music, but we can't consider them part of the hip hop tradition. They are something else, because when you start talking about gangster rap and the shady record companies and radio stations that promote, feel they are the drug dealers. So you have pharmacists, and then you have drug dealers. Now we can get into, the conspiracy of the pharmaceutical companies being the biggest drug dealers, yada, yada, yada. For the sake of this conversation, we're delineating between a pharmacist, somebody who is trained and who has taken an oath to um, help heal the community, versus the drug dealer who is pushing poison, who has no care and concern for the community as long as they get their money, right? And so what would they push? The poison that they push is all the women are hoes, overly sex driven, um, uh, overly the sex is overly emphasized, the violence, kill, kill, kill. I'm a thug, thug, thug. I'm a rob, steal, rape. And the people who actually promote drugs, Xanax, syrup, codeine, popping pills, like all of this is not part of the Jashay, not part of the hip hop tradition. So anyone promoting any of this is not being hip hop in the least. Is not being Jashay in the least. Because the Jashay tradition promotes health, wellness, stability. People who promote this promote destruction, ill health, disease. And so we have to make a distinction. And just because they rap doesn't mean it's hip hop. Just because they sing doesn't mean it's soul and jazz. It's something else, right? And so I just want to give in this last segment an example of, if I'm the DJ, if I'm the Inkinsi, and I'm digging in the crates and I'm creating prescriptions for the public, right? So of course I would go to a record shop and I would find, records, and I know in modern age is MP3s and, playlists and all that kind of stuff. But there's something about having the Inkisi, the records, the CDs on deck that just is more in par with the culture, right? And then I invite everyone to a party. This is Mad Lib here, going through the jazz section, getting ready to make some samples and produce. But he's also a DJ, right? So I'm at the party. This is me, dark skin with a beard, as a Nkinsi, a curator, a pharmacist. getting ready to throw a party, and I might have these prescriptions, these inkisi. So it's like a function, right? A mathematical function. So here is just and I'm compounding in a sense here, not sampling, but I'm still compounding. I'm making a list. So I'm creating a lyricism in Kisi for mental stimulation. So I just want to stimulate my creativity, my wordplay, my poetry. So I may prescribe some Black Moon on the top left corner. Who got the props? Cannabis 2000 BC, Raw Digger, Imperial, or Method Man, Bring the Pain, right? Just some raw, gritty, lyrical music, right? Because I'm trying to stimulate my mental and creativity, right? Or I might create a dance in Kisi, right, for feeling down and out. And so that may consist of some Queen Pen, a Party 80 Party just ran all through it, right? Some Missy Elliott, Lose Control with Fat Man Scoop, some Chaos out of Canada with Superstar Part Zero. I'll go old school with Treat 'Em Right by Chubb Rock. All of these are guaranteed to put people on the dance floor and set the party off right and increase the vibrations in the mood. So that's a dancing Kisi. This is an example of a dancing Kisi. Right. And so I might prescribe a golden era in Kisi, right, for memory activation. Like when I'm just trying to stimulate or agitate the feeling of hip hop. When you just want that pure hip hop sound, right? So I might prescribe Yo-Yo, You Can't Play With My Yo-Yo, or P Rock and CL Smooth, They Reminisce Over You, or Bahamadia, You Know How We Do, or Nas, It Ain't Hard to Tell, right? Like these are the crown jewels of the golden era. And then I might, prescribe a jazz in Kisi for adjusting your level of coolness, right? To awaken the ancestors of the jazz tradition. So I might prescribe a Diggable Planets, a Rebirth of Slick, Most Def Umi Says, Gang Star at Jazz Thing, or a Tribe Called Quest, an award tour with Muhammad My Man, right? This will be an example of a prescription or a jazz in Kisi, right? And lastly, we have a knowledge born in Kisi, for acting one's cultural consciousness, right? So I might prescribe some Dead Prez, Let's Get Free, some Killer Priest, Heavy Mental, Nas, Nasir Jones, I can't be what I want to be, right? Or Lauryn Hill, Doo-Wop, that thing, right? So this would be a knowledge born in Kisi. So we have different type of Nkisi for different type of situations where our Ngolo, our energy is low in disease, and we need to re-up and restore our health in these different particular areas, right? So it is with that I end this conversation, and I hope that this makes sense and that you vibe with it. So I encourage each and every one of you to like and share this video. And if you have any questions, leave it in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them in a timely fashion. And I just look forward to your feedback. Tell me what you think. Hotep.
This program was created with the love and support of all our Patreon members and subscribers. If you are not a member yet and would like to see more content like this, consider becoming a member today. The link is in the description of this video. Your support is greatly appreciated.